I didn't think anything was wrong when I first noticed the car behind me. It was early afternoon, the kind of day where the sun is bright but not blinding, and the road ahead looks like it goes on forever. I'd already been driving for a few hours, and this was the easiest part of the trip: straight highway, light traffic, nothing to really think about. I had made this drive plenty of times before. That's probably why I didn't trust my instincts when they first kicked in. The car behind me was a dark sedan, black, or maybe dark blue. It stayed far enough back that I didn't notice any details at first. Just headlights. Just another driver headed in the same direction. At least, that's what I assumed. About 20 minutes passed, and I realized something small but strange. I hadn't been passed. On highways like this, cars usually move around constantly. Someone speeds up, someone slows down, people change lanes, people exit. It's never the same group of vehicles for very long. But this car stayed. Same distance, same position, same lane. I checked my speed. I was going just a little over the limit, nothing crazy. I told myself the driver probably set cruise control, just like I did. Still, I started checking my mirrors more often than before. Another 10 minutes passed. The car was still there. I changed lanes. A few seconds later, the sedan changed lanes too. That's when I started paying attention. I slowed down slightly, letting my car drop back. The sedan slowed down with me, keeping the distance almost exact. When I sped up again, it followed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't aggressive. It was precise. I laughed to myself and shook my head. "Relax," I said out loud, alone in the car. "You're just bored." To prove that I wasn't imagining things, I decided to test it. I sped up enough to pass a semi-truck ahead of me, then stayed in the left lane longer than I normally would. Most drivers would either pass me or hang back. The sedan stayed behind me. When I finally moved back into the right lane, it followed without hesitation. That's when I noticed the windows. They were tinted dark, darker than normal. I couldn't see the driver's face or even a clear outline of their head, just a dark shape where a person should be. A small wave of discomfort rolled through me. I told myself it still didn't mean anything. Some people just don't like passing. Some people get comfortable following one car for long distances. But then something happened that made my stomach tighten. I took an exit. It wasn't my usual exit. In fact, it wasn't even close. I chose it because it led to a smaller road that cut through a quiet area, mostly trees, a few buildings, nothing busy. I signaled early and slowed down. The sedan followed me off the highway. That was the moment everything changed. The ramp curved away from the noise of traffic, and the sounds of passing cars faded quickly. When I reached the bottom, I checked my mirror again. Still there. I felt silly for how fast my heart started beating. "It's nothing," I said again, but this time my voice didn't sound confident. The road ahead was mostly empty. No traffic lights, no stores, just a long stretch of pavement and trees lining both sides. I drove for a minute. Then two. The sedan didn't turn off. I made my first real turn onto a side road I knew led toward a few old office buildings. The car followed. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I checked my phone to make sure I had signal. I did. That helped a little, but not much. I slowed down, pretending I was unsure where I was going. The sedan slowed down too. At that point, I was no longer pretending anything. I was being followed. I pulled into the parking lot of a closed business, a place with faded signs and empty windows. I parked crooked on purpose, just to make it obvious I wasn't stopping normally. The sedan slowed as it passed the entrance. For a second, I thought it might keep going. Instead, it stopped across the street. The engine stayed running. We sat there, facing each other from a distance, separated by nothing but an empty road. I stared at the car, waiting for a door to open. Nothing happened. 10 seconds felt like a full minute. Then the sedan slowly pulled away and disappeared down the road. I didn't move. I stayed parked, staring at the spot where it vanished, replaying every moment in my head. Eventually, I told myself it was over. I drove back to the highway and continued my trip, trying to calm down. But the feeling never fully left, because part of me knew if I hadn't taken that exit, if I hadn't turned off the road, I don't know how long that car would have stayed behind me. And that thought followed me for the rest of the drive. For a while, I convinced myself the whole thing was over. Once I merged back onto the highway, traffic picked up again. Other cars filled the space around me. and the familiar noise of engines rushing past helped calm my nerves. I even laughed quietly at myself, thinking I'd let boredom get the best of me. People follow each other on the road all the time. People take the same exits. People drive strange. That didn't mean anything bad had been about to happen. At least, that's what I told myself. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, turning the light a soft orange. I turned the radio up a little, trying to settle back into the normal rhythm of driving. That's when I saw it again. Same dark sedan. Same distance. Same lane. At first, I thought it had to be another car that just looked similar. Black sedans aren't exactly rare, but as I focused on it, my chest tightened. The tint on the windows was the same. The shape was the same. Even a small mark on the front bumper looked familiar. There was no way it had taken a different route and ended up behind me again, unless it never left. My hand started to feel slightly numb on the steering wheel. I checked the speedometer and slowed down by a few miles per hour. I wanted to see if traffic would pass me and break whatever strange connection this was. Cars passed. The sedan stayed. I changed lanes again. A moment later, it followed. At this point, I wasn't trying to test anything. I just wanted to understand why. I told myself I would take the next exit, my real exit this time, and head toward a busier area. If the car followed me there, I'd know for sure something was wrong. The exit sign appeared ahead. 2 miles. 1 mile. I turned my blinker on early. The sedan stayed behind me. As I slowed onto the ramp, I felt my heart pounding hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. This exit led to a more populated road. Restaurants, gas stations, traffic lights, the kind of place where someone following you would stand out. I reached the bottom of the ramp and turned right. The sedan turned right too. I pulled into the first gas station I saw. Bright lights, several cars, a couple people walking in and out. I parked near the entrance and stayed inside my car, watching the road through the windshield. The sedan drove past the entrance slowly. For a split second, I thought it was going to pull in. It didn't. It continued down the road and disappeared into traffic. I sat there for a full minute, not breathing normally, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. I went inside the gas station, bought a bottle of water I didn't even need, and stood near the window, watching my car the entire time. Nothing happened. When I got back in and drove away, I felt foolish again. But that feeling didn't last long, because about 15 minutes later, when the road opened back up and traffic thinned, I saw it, behind me, again. I can't properly explain what that did to me. It wasn't panic. It wasn't fear in the usual sense. It was the realization that this wasn't random. I started thinking back over the day, where I had stopped, who might have seen me, whether I'd accidentally done something to draw attention. Nothing stood out. I was just a regular person driving a regular car. That thought made it worse. I didn't want to go straight home anymore. I didn't want anyone knowing where I lived. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started driving without a destination. I took turns when they felt right. I avoided patterns. I doubled back. I went through neighborhoods and onto roads that didn't make sense for someone just trying to get somewhere. The sedan stayed with me through all of it. Sometimes close, sometimes farther back, but never gone. The sky slowly darkened and the streetlights flickered on one by one. The road felt different at night, quieter, more closed in. And that's when I noticed something new. The sedan's headlights flicked off for just a second, then back on. I checked my mirrors again. The car was closer now, closer than it had been all day. I sped up. It sped up too. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. No matter what I did, no matter where I went, that car was never trying to pass me. It wasn't in a hurry. It was waiting. By the time night fully settled in, I felt like I'd been driving forever. Streetlights blurred past my windows, each one flashing by like a slow countdown. The radio was still on, but I couldn't tell you what was playing. I hadn't actually heard it in a long time. All my attention was on the road and the car behind me. I didn't look directly at it anymore. I checked reflections, mirrors, shadows. It was always there. At some point, I realized something else that bothered me even more than being followed. The sedan never honked, never flashed its lights, never tried to get my attention. It didn't act angry. It didn't act impatient. It just stayed. I turned onto a longer road that led away from the neighborhoods and toward a more open area. Fewer houses, fewer lights. I told myself I'd made a mistake the moment I committed to it. The road narrowed, and trees crept closer on both sides. I glanced at my phone again. Signal was still there, but weaker now. I considered calling someone, anyone, but I didn't know what I'd even say. "Hey, I think a car has been following me for hours." That sounded ridiculous, even to me. Ahead, I saw a traffic light glowing red in the distance. I slowed as I approached it. The sedan slowed too. I stopped at the light and watched the mirror closely. For the first time all day, the car pulled up right behind me, close enough that its headlights filled my entire back window. The light stayed red longer than it should have. I checked my doors. Locked. I watched the sedan's hood rise and fall slightly with the idle of the engine. Still no movement inside. Still no faces. When the light finally turned green, I didn't go right away. I waited half a second. Then I pressed the gas. The sedan followed instantly. My breathing felt shallow now. My shoulders were tight. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I needed witnesses. People. Cameras. I scanned the road ahead for anything open. That's when I saw it. A 24-hour grocery store. The parking lot was bright, busy enough to make me feel safe. I turned in quickly, not signaling. The sedan followed. I pulled into a random parking space and shut the car off immediately. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought I might pass out. The sedan rolled past me slowly. I turned in my seat, watching it through the side window. It didn't park. It didn't stop. It drove to the far end of the lot and waited. Headlights on, engine running. I stayed frozen. A few people walked past my car, chatting, laughing, completely unaware of what was happening just a few rows away. I watched the sedan for several minutes. Nothing. No one got out. No doors opened. Finally, I forced myself out of the car and walked toward the store, keeping my head down. I didn't want to look like I was afraid, but I was. Inside, the store felt strangely normal. Bright lights, music, shopping carts rattling across the floor. I stood near the entrance and pretended to check my phone, watching the parking lot through the glass doors. The sedan didn't move. After about 10 minutes, I saw its headlights turn off. Then the engine shut down. That was worse. I waited. Another few minutes passed. Then the headlights came back on. The sedan started and pulled out of the lot, slowly disappearing back onto the road. I waited longer than I needed to before leaving. When I finally got back into my car and drove away, I took a completely different route than planned. Back roads, turns I'd never taken before. For a while, I didn't see the sedan. Relief washed over me, so hard it almost made me dizzy. I started to believe it was finally over, until I reached a long, empty stretch of road. No cars ahead, no cars behind, just darkness. I exhaled and relaxed my grip on the wheel. And then, in my rear-view mirror, two headlights appeared. Far back, but unmistakable. Same height, same color, same distance. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, because now I knew something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't misunderstanding. Whoever was in that car knew exactly where I was going, and they weren't finished with me yet. At that point, I stopped trying to convince myself there was an explanation. I didn't care if the driver was lost. I didn't care if this was some strange coincidence. All I knew was that the same car had been behind me for most of the day, and now most of the night. I needed this to end. The road I was on stretched forward with no turns in sight. Trees lined both sides, and the darkness felt heavier here, like sound didn't travel as far. I slowed down. The sedan slowed with me. I sped up. It stayed perfectly matched. I checked my mirrors again and noticed something that made my heart skip. The sedan's headlights were dimmer now. Not off, just low beams, like it didn't want to draw attention. I felt a sudden urge to get away from the car completely, even if just for a moment. So I made a decision that felt risky but necessary. I pulled over, not into a driveway, not into a parking lot, just onto the side of the road. I turned on my hazard lights and came to a stop. My hands were shaking as I waited. The sedan slowed behind me. For a moment, I thought it might stop too. Instead, it passed me, slowly, painfully slowly. As it pulled alongside my car, I turned my head just enough to see inside. The windows were still dark, but not dark enough anymore. I could see movement. There was more than one person inside. I couldn't make out faces, just shapes, shadows shifting in the front seats. The sedan continued past me and drove on. disappearing into the darkness ahead. I stayed parked, hazards flashing, breathing hard. I counted to 30, then 60. When I finally pulled back onto the road, I turned around and drove in the opposite direction. I didn't see the sedan again that night. I made it home much later than planned. I sat in my driveway for a while before going inside, checking the street, listening for engines, making sure I was alone. For weeks after that, every time I drove, I checked my mirrors more than necessary. I avoided that highway completely. I told a few people about what happened, but most of them brushed it off. Probably just someone driving the same route. They said, "You were tired. You overthought it." Maybe they were right. But months later, I was scrolling through local news when I saw something that made my stomach tighten. An article about a dark sedan. Multiple reports. Different locations. Drivers claiming they were followed for long distances. The article didn't say much else. No names. No clear outcome. Just enough information to remind me of that day. I closed the article and put my phone down, because I already knew something I couldn't explain. This happened during a road trip that was supposed to be easy. I had left early in the morning, planning to reach my destination before dark. The drive itself wasn't stressful, mostly highway, mostly familiar roads, but a few delays slowed everything down. By the time afternoon rolled around, I was tired in that dull, heavy way that sneaks up on you while driving. My eyes felt dry, my legs stiff, and I realized I hadn't stopped in hours. So when I saw a sign for a rest stop coming up, I didn't think twice. It wasn't one of the big, modern ones with restaurants and dozens of cars. Just a standard rest area, bathrooms, vending machines, picnic tables. The parking lot wasn't empty, but it wasn't busy either. Maybe 4 or 5 cars scattered far apart. I parked, stretched, and stepped out of my car. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No traffic noise, no voices, just the sound of wind moving through nearby trees. That should have been my first clue to leave. As I walked toward the building, I noticed a man standing near the entrance. He looked normal enough, middle-aged, casual clothes, hands in his pockets. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't leaning on anything, just standing there watching the parking lot. When I got closer, he turned his head slowly and smiled at me. Not a friendly smile, not an unfriendly one either. Just a smile that didn't seem to match the situation. "Long drive?" he asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Yeah," I replied, already walking past him. He nodded like he expected that answer. Inside, the building felt colder than outside. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the floor looked worn, like it hadn't been cleaned properly in a long time. I went to the bathroom, washed my hands, and told myself I was being ridiculous. People talk at rest stops all the time. People smile. People stand around. Still, I finished faster than usual. When I stepped back outside, the man was no longer by the entrance. He was closer to my car. Not right next to it, just close enough that I noticed immediately. He turned when he saw me and smiled again. "Heading far?" he asked. I stopped walking. "Not too far," I said. He nodded, like he was storing that information. "Road gets pretty empty around here," he added, "especially later." I didn't answer. I kept walking toward my car, keys already in my hand. He took a few steps in my direction, not fast, not slow. Just enough to make it clear he was following me. "You traveling alone?" he asked. That's when my chest tightened. I didn't respond. I unlocked my car, got in quickly, and locked the doors. Through the window, I saw his smile fade. Not disappear, just fade. He stopped a few feet away and stared at me through the glass. I started the engine immediately. As I pulled out of the parking space, I saw him step back toward the entrance, returning to the exact spot where he'd been standing before. Watching a lot, waiting. As I drove away, I checked my mirrors more than once. I didn't see him follow me. But even after the rest stop disappeared behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left at exactly the right moment. Because whatever he was waiting for, it wasn't someone who hesitated. After leaving the rest stop, I tried to shake off the feeling that someone had been watching me. The highway stretched ahead, straight and empty, with the late afternoon sun beginning to dip. Shadows from the trees leaned across the pavement like long fingers. I kept glancing in my mirrors, half expecting to see him, just standing there, waiting for the next car. But there was nothing. No car, no figure, just a faint hum of my tires on the asphalt. I told myself I was overreacting. People often stand around at rest stops. People talk. People ask questions. It was normal. I turned up the music a little louder. Tried to focus on the road. Then I noticed a car behind me. At first, I didn't pay much attention. People fall in line behind you all the time. But something about the way it followed, quiet, careful, matching my speed perfectly made the hairs on my neck stand up. I adjusted my speed. It adjusted too. I changed lanes, and it changed lanes with me. A knot grew in my stomach. I didn't want to believe it, but the feeling from the rest stop came back stronger than ever. I passed the gas station on the right. I thought about pulling in, but I was afraid of making the situation worse. I didn't know if he was inside or just watching from the lot. Instead, I stayed on the road. I drove for another 15 minutes, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Every turn I took, every lane change, I felt eyes on me. My mind kept replaying the man at the rest stop, his calm smile, the way he had asked if I was traveling alone, the way he followed me just far enough to make it clear he wasn't leaving. I told myself over and over, it's nothing. It's probably nothing. And then it happened. I slowed down for a curve in the road, just a gentle bend, nothing dangerous. That's when I saw him, standing on the side of the road. Same figure, same calm stance, watching me. I slammed my foot on the gas. He didn't move, didn't run, didn't wave. I swallowed hard and kept driving. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was someone from the next exit. Maybe it was a trick of the shadows. Maybe I was just too tired and imagining things. But the rational part of my mind couldn't ignore the fear crawling up my spine. I finally reached the next town. A small one, lights glowing in shop windows, people walking on sidewalks. Relief washed over me. I slowed down, thinking the stranger would stop following me now. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing, just darkness behind me. For a moment, I felt safe. But the feeling didn't last long, because as I drove past the town, I saw him again. Not in a car, not walking along the road, just standing there, calm, watching, waiting. I didn't look away this time. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I just drove as fast as I dared, trying not to panic. I told myself I would never stop at another rest area again. Never. And I never did. Even now, every time I drive long distances, I remember that day. The quiet smile, the simple questions, the patience. The rest stop seemed harmless. But I know better now. This happened on a night I wasn't supposed to be driving late. The plan was simple. Leave in the early evening. Follow the highway. Be home before midnight. I had made the drive before, so I wasn't worried. I trusted my GPS more than my own sense of direction anyway. It had never failed me. At least, not before that night. The sun had already set by the time I hit the long stretch of road where traffic starts to thin out. The sky was dark but clear, and the road ahead was lit only by my headlights and the occasional streetlight. The GPS sat on my dashboard, glowing softly, giving calm directions in its usual neutral voice. Everything felt normal. About an hour into the drive, I noticed traffic getting lighter than usual. Fewer cars passed me. Fewer headlights appeared in the opposite lane. I didn't think much of it. Then the GPS spoke. In 1 mile, take the exit on the right. I frowned. I wasn't supposed to take any exits for at least another 30 minutes. I glanced at the screen. The route had changed. At first, I assumed there had been an accident or construction ahead. That happens all the time. GPS apps reroute without warning. I trusted it. I took the exit. Almost immediately, the road felt different. The highway noise faded behind me, replaced by silence. The exit led to a narrow 2-lane road surrounded by trees. No buildings, no lights, just darkness pressing in from both sides. I slowed down slightly. The GPS showed the new route clearly. According to it, this road would reconnect to the main highway in about 20 minutes. That didn't make sense. This area wasn't supposed to have roads like this. I checked my phone signal. Still there. A little weaker, but there. I kept driving. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I hadn't seen another car since leaving the highway. No houses, no streetlights, no signs, just trees and darkness. The road started to twist and turn, bending in ways that made me uncomfortable. I had to slow down even more, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I told myself to relax. The GPS still worked. The route was still there. Then the voice spoke again. In 500 feet, turn left. I slowed and looked ahead. There was no road, just trees. I checked again. At the last second, I saw it, a narrow dirt road barely visible in the darkness, cutting sharply off the main pavement. I hesitated. This didn't feel right. I zoomed in on the map. The route was clear. The GPS insisted this was the correct turn. Against my better judgment, I turned left. The tires crunched loudly on dirt and gravel. The road was uneven, full of small bumps that made the car shake. My headlights barely reached far enough to show what was ahead. I glanced at my phone again. No signal. That's when my stomach tightened. I told myself it was just a dead zone. That happens sometimes. Still, the silence felt heavier now, like the world outside the car had closed in. The GPS stayed on. The route continued. I drove slowly, listening to every sound, the engine, the tires, my own breathing. After a few minutes, I noticed something strange. The GPS said I was getting closer to my destination, but the road was getting worse. Narrower, rougher. Trees leaned in from both sides, their branches catching the edges of my headlights. I felt like I was driving into somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Then, far ahead, I saw something that made me feel a brief wave of relief. Headlights. Another car. They were parked in the middle of the road, facing me. Not moving, just sitting there. I slowed to a stop several car lengths away. The headlights were on, bright and blinding, but I couldn't see anyone inside. I waited. Nothing happened. The GPS spoke softly again. Continue straight. That was the moment I realized something was wrong, because there was no straight path. Only that car, and the darkness beyond it. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at the car blocking the dirt road. My heart was beating faster than it had all night. I want to get out and see if anyone was inside, but something in me screamed not to. The GPS kept talking, calm and unbothered. Continue straight in 200 feet. Straight? There was no straight path. Only the headlights and the darkness beyond them. I took a deep breath and decided to trust the GPS. I nudged the wheel slightly to the left, trying to pass the parked car on the shoulder. My tires sank a little into loose gravel, and the engine groaned. For a moment, I thought the car might move, but it didn't. I kept driving slowly, every sense on high alert. The headlights from the other car reflected off the branches, creating moving shadows that danced across the hood of my car. My mind was playing tricks on me. I knew it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The other car was gone. No engine noise, no lights, just darkness ahead and behind me. I exhaled, trying to calm down. Maybe it had pulled off somewhere I couldn't see. Maybe it wasn't even real. I told myself to relax. After all, it was just a car. I drove further. The road twisted more sharply now, and the dirt turned to loose sand in some areas. My tires slid slightly. I gripped the wheel tight, focusing on the path ahead. That's when I saw it, a faint light ahead. Small, like a distant lantern or a single porch light. It flickered. I assumed it was a house. Maybe someone lived out here. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because someone was nearby. Dread because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be near whoever or whatever it belonged to. As I got closer, I noticed the shape wasn't a house at all. It was a small structure, like a shed or a storage building. Nothing else around it. No driveway. No road leading away. Just darkness in every direction. The GPS beeped softly. Turn right in 100 feet. There was no right turn. Only trees. I stopped the car, shaking slightly. My phone was completely dead now. No signal, no light. I considered turning around. I considered just staying in the car until morning. But the GPS continued giving directions, and I didn't have another choice. I turned the wheel carefully, following a narrow gap between the trees. The car scraped slightly against branches, and I winced, but I couldn't stop now. After what felt like forever, the road widened again. Gravel, dirt, and occasional patches of pavement. I thought I might finally be back on a familiar road. Then I saw it, a figure standing ahead in the middle of the road. It didn't move. It didn't wave. It just stood there. I slammed my foot on the brake, and stopped. It didn't react. Not a twitch. I considered backing up, but the road behind me was narrow, dark, and filled with trees. I didn't have space to turn. My stomach sank. My pulse raced. The GPS beeped again. Calm, insistent. Continue straight in 200 feet. I had no choice. I slowly pressed the gas, keeping my eyes on the figure. My headlights illuminated it briefly. A person, yes, but too still, too quiet. I drove past. Nothing happened. No movement. No sound. When I glanced in my rearview mirror, the figure was gone. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I drove as fast as I dared, following the GPS through twisting roads, uneven dirt paths, and shadows that seemed too heavy for night. Finally, after what felt like hours, the GPS recalculated. The road opened onto a familiar highway, lights in the distance marking towns I recognized. I exhaled. For the first time in over an hour, I felt like I could breathe normally. I didn't take that route again for months. Even now, when I see quiet, rural roads on a GPS late at night, I think about that stretch of dirt, that flickering light, and the figure in the middle of the road. It was late at night, and I was on a road trip with two friends. We'd been driving for hours, music low, windows cracked, the kind of quiet ride where conversation drifts in and out. The highway stretched ahead, dark and empty, the headlights cutting through the night. We were tired but relaxed. That's when we saw him, a guy standing on the side of the road, thumb out, backpack at his feet. We argued briefly about stopping. "Do we really pick him up?" my friend asked. "I don't know," the other replied. "Looks normal enough." Eventually, I made the call. We pulled over. He got in a back seat without saying much. Quiet, calm, polite. Nothing unusual at first. "Thanks," he said softly. I was starting to think no one would stop. We nodded, smiling awkwardly. For the first 10 minutes, he barely spoke. Short answers when asked questions. Name, age, destination, nothing more. Then he gave us directions for where to drop him off. We glanced at the GPS. It didn't exist. Not on the map. That should have been the first red flag. We joked nervously, thinking he probably knew a shortcut, or maybe it was a small local road. The highway eventually gave way to a darker, narrower road. Trees pressed close on either side, shadows flickering from our headlights. The guy in the back didn't speak, just sat quietly, hands in his lap, backpack on the floor. After a few minutes, he finally spoke again. "You're taking the long way," he said. Voice calm, neutral. We laughed it off, joking about GPS reroutes. But something in his tone felt off. Not threatening, not loud, just deliberate. A knot formed in my stomach. I glanced at my friends. They were starting to notice it too. The road twisted and turned unexpectedly. Potholes, narrow edges, low branches. No houses, no lights. The car felt small in the darkness. The hitchhiker leaned slightly forward and said quietly, almost himself, "You shouldn't pick people up out here." We laughed nervously, but I didn't feel like laughing. I kept my eyes on the road, listening to every sound, the tires, the engine, the occasional whine through the trees. After a few more minutes, the GPS finally recalculated, showing a rough, unmarked path that supposedly led to a small side road. We reached it. The hitchhiker told us this was fine. He didn't get out. Instead, he leaned back and smiled. Not a friendly smile, not mean smile, just a smile. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the darkness, walking toward the trees. We didn't see him again, but I remember the feeling of unease that didn't leave for the rest of the trip. The road felt quieter than before, almost empty of life. And even now, whenever I drive on an unfamiliar road at night, I think about that calm voice, that quiet smile, and the hitchhiker who didn't need us to take him home. After he stepped out, the car felt emptier than it should have. We drove in silence for several minutes. The music was off. The road stretched ahead, dark and twisting, lined by trees that seemed to lean closer the faster we went. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him running after us. But the road behind was empty. No lights, no figure, nothing. We all tried to laugh it off. Nervous, forced laughs. "Maybe he's taking a shortcut through the woods," one friend said. "Yeah, probably," the other replied. voice tighter than before. But none of us believed it. The rest of the drive felt heavier. Every shadow, every movement at the edge of the headlights felt bigger than it should have. Branches scraped the side of the car, though we were nowhere near any trees close enough to do that. Tires crunched on gravel patches, though the road was mostly paved. We didn't talk much. Eventually, we reached a familiar stretch of highway again, the lights of a nearby town glowing ahead. Relief started to seep back, but the tension didn't leave. Weeks later, I saw a news article about someone matching his description. Calm voice, backpack, hitchhiker, seen along the same roads we had traveled that night. Multiple reports. No one harmed, but unsettling disappearances, people feeling watched, strange sightings. I couldn't shake it. Even now, when I drive late at night and see someone standing on the side of the road, thumb out, I hesitate. I think about the calm voice, the quiet smile, and the way he walked into the trees without a word.